Thank you so much for attending. We're super excited to host this panel of tech professionals. So thank you everyone for attending How to Make a Career Change to Tech. A little bit about us. We are Lithios, a mobile app agency based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. And this year we've seen such a huge increase in remote jobs in tech. Our team is remote ourselves. We realize that not everyone has the skills and ability to work in a tech career and have the luxury of working at home. So we at Lithios took the initiative to create a program called the Lithios Skills Accelerator. And the Lithios Skills Accelerator is a virtual online learning platform to learn the skills needed to enter a career in tech. We'll be hosting a series of workshops and tech skill courses in 2021. So we're super excited about launching this program and wanted to kick this off by hosting the event and kind of having conversations about jumping into a career in tech. For today's webinar, we will be starting with introductions. We'll introduce the panel and those who are participating in Zoom. We'd like to hear from you as well. And then we'll chat a little bit about what it's like to work in tech and then provide some advice and Q&A. At the end of the session, we are offering a one-on-one career coaching session. So after the event, if you have any follow-up questions about tech, if you're looking to learn more, or if you'd like to, if you're interested in participating in the Skills Accelerator program, we'll be sending out an email application form for these one-on-one career coaching sessions. So if you want to do a deeper dive and kind of help jumpstart your career in tech, we'll have an application for those that are interested. Spots are limited, so we'll send a form for you to complete, and we'd love to see you there. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'd like to let our panelists introduce themselves. So just tell us a little bit about who you are and kind of how you got into tech.
Cool. Well, I will start. Hi, everyone. I'm Cassidy. I work at Lithios as a business development analyst. I have a background in psychology, and I've been with Lithios for a little over a year and a half. At Lithios, I am really lucky I get to work with people who know a lot more about technology and business than I do, so it's really fun to constantly learn and getting to try new things, but typically I am working to generate new business. I educate clients about our app design and development process. I gather business requirements, help them get a proposal. I help out with bandwidth, presentations, social media, other educational content, all sorts of stuff. So for about the 4.5 years or so prior to working at Lithios, I worked at a restaurant in downtown Raleigh, which really helped to set me up for success in my current role. But after a couple of years, I just felt kind of frustrated with some aspects of the job. Like I felt like I wasn't growing as much as I wanted to, and I was super, super eager to grow as a person and in my career. So I began researching and brainstorming various paths I might take. And I ended up pursuing entrepreneurship, which felt really vulnerable. It felt really challenging throughout, but I was fortunate enough to be able to launch a small company. And by putting myself out there, I was introduced to someone who ended up introducing me to a different program called NC IDEA, which I went through. And that program really helped me to figure out that the way that I launched my company was like totally the wrong way of doing it. So I ended up closing my doors, the doors of my company. But through that program, I was put in contact with my current boss. And we sat down, had a coffee, and here I am.
I'm Lindsay. I'm a technical recruiter. I've been with Hire Networks for about 5 years. Since I am technical myself, my specialty within the company is I partner with local software startups to fill their open technical positions, mostly very niche or kind of offbeat technical skill sets. I also have a degree in psychology with a child development concentration. I worked in that field for 2.5 years before making the career change into the tech industry. I had lived with a software engineer for several years, and he found it helpful to talk through his coding problems out loud to someone else. And at that time, I understood it a little bit because I'd experimented with web development in like the early 2000s through like Neopets and FreeWebs and GeoCities and Zanga. And I learned a lot from that and from him just via osmosis. But I never saw myself going into tech until literally the day I did. On a whim one day after being in child development for 2.5 years, I went on Triangle Jobs on Reddit, which ironically, I ended up taking that over a couple years later. And I found a job post for a part-time internship at a tech recruiting agency. I had no idea what recruiting was. I just like threw a dart in a direction and it hit the target. And it turns out that the recruiter's mom was my boss at the childcare agency. And instead of her getting upset at me for job hunting, she actually gave me a really, really good recommendation. So I got the internship, which turned into a job, and I ended up being really good at it because I went into it already technical, and I was able to understand the technical positions and talk to engineers beyond just the keyword matching. So these days I work really closely with startup companies here in the area to help them figure out what it is they need, and then I go out into the community and find it.
Hey everyone, my name is Brendan Michelson. I'm the Senior Director of Technology for Lithios. My day-to-day is I manage the kind of technical development and project management of all of our apps and our web apps and our websites that the company is currently working on with our clients. I work very closely with Tim. I work very closely with Cassidy, kind of on the design and admin side of that. But I manage a team of full stack software developers. I am a full stack software developer myself. And I've been doing tech for about 8 years now, since I was in college. I went to college actually for mechanical engineering, and got involved with an entrepreneurship group very early on, and then actually ended up starting my first startup out of my dorm room, and running that for a few years, moved to Raleigh in that time, really kind of enjoyed the tech world, did a number of different entrepreneurship things, ran some companies, did some advisory and consulting work, and then ended up hopping on with Lithios to help with tech development and project development. So super excited to share my tech knowledge and great to be here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carissa. I am a customer success executive at Cisco. Hopefully, if you're on this panel, your event, you know that means the tech company, not the food company. I am based outside of Denver, and I've been at Cisco about 7.5 years. I got into Cisco from what I thought was going to be a career in academia. I was actually in grad school at NC State, go Pack, and through that program realized that academia was not the right fit for me. So because I'm a why person, I love to understand how things work. I'm very curious and I love to collaborate and work with other people. I started looking at other options and wound up at Cisco. And at Cisco, I've had a variety of jobs. I joke that still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. I'm getting closer. That's the good news. But I've been a network engineer, an operations manager. I've led some of our veteran and diversity hiring programs. I've worked in training and enablement, and now I help our biggest customers realize the value out of the solutions they've already purchased from us. So I'm also very excited to be here, and let's dive in.
Awesome. And I want to hear from our participants as well. So those who are joining in virtually, feel free to drop into the chat. I want to hear, tell us a little bit about yourself. I want to know, what is your current job and what do you want your next job to be? Love to hear more about you. So we'll kind of let you tell us about yourself in the chat.
And Tim, why don't you give a little bit about, I know you're running this, but why don't you give a little bit about what you do as well?
Oh yeah, of course. So my name is Tim Rosenberg. I serve as director at Lithios with Cassidy and Brendan. And my background, let's see, I think the first time that I knew that I was meant to be entrepreneurial was when I was in 11th grade. I started my own business teaching art classes. I was really gifted at like painting and drawing, so I started um, selling classes to teach, and I included supplies, and I did it because it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I found it very fulfilling, and the skill set of like being creative and artistic brought me to a career in graphic design. So I ended up going to NC State for their graphic design program, and I was able to transfer those artistic skills into a technical application as well. So, and then from there, I've kind of run a couple of my own entrepreneurial endeavors, learning everything I knew from 11th grade as a starting point. How to sell, how to start something, how to get customers. And then today, what I enjoy is kind of is adding the business and strategy on top of tech skills. So it's good to have a foundation of some technical ability, but even more important is how to apply that and make it marketable. So that's a little bit about myself. Let's chat a little bit about that moment of transitioning. So I like to kind of share a little bit about myself, and then we'll kind of go into panel about that first moment that you decided to switch into tech. So a lot of the participants that are joining us virtually, a lot of them maybe be at a fork in the road in their life. There's their current career path and they want to switch to something else, but they aren't really quite sure yet. So I would say for me, that path was, I would say it was when I was applying to two different colleges. I was either going to go to an art school and kind of continue on the art path, um, or I was going to go down like a more businessy path with design. And I think the moment for me was when it was, I think, 2008 or 2009, when the housing market had crashed. So the economy was like really crumbling, and I couldn't really see a feasible career uh, offering like oil painting portraits. So I think that was the moment I was like, okay, I've got this creativity skill set. I know how to make things look visually appealing. And then that was the moment that kind of switched me to tech. So I'll hands off to our panelists.
Yeah, so for me, let's see. I think the moment that I knew I wanted to be in tech was when my boss offered me my job. But before that, before my 4.5 years working at a restaurant, I lived in Pittsburgh, and I probably applied to like 300 different jobs, just wanting to get anything that wasn't in a restaurant because I had done that in high school previously. So yeah, I think for me, I had been in this waitressing position because I just wanted to get on my feet when I came back to Raleigh. I felt frustrated. I felt like I could offer more. So I just kind of felt like, okay, I'm just gonna carve out my own path. I'm just gonna create my own opportunity and start this company, which was, by the way, it was a personal chef company. It was a platform that connected people who wanted to book services of personal chefs, locally and at various different price points. But yeah, when my boss offered me a position, I just was really excited to do something new. I knew that I could offer fresh ideas and support in a variety of different ways. And when I first started my job, it felt like my current job in Lithios, it felt like I was in a summer camp, just like learning so many different things every single day. It was super intense. I really didn't know anything about technology. And that was like a year and a half ago. And I'd say I'm hanging in there now. I have a lot more knowledge now than I did before. So it's been a really cool transition.
I think my answer is pretty much the same as Cassidy in that it was basically when I got the job offer. I didn't know that it was going to be something that I was going to be good at. I didn't realize that I had that bank of knowledge in my head just via osmosis, and was able to tap into everything that I had left over from, you know, 6th, 7th grade in the early 2000s. I didn't realize that all of that would eventually mean something. And then when I started getting on client calls and taking job descriptions and making them make sense, and pitching them to candidates, I was like, oh, I get it. Oh, I get it. And that was really cool.
Yeah, I see very kind of similar vibes with my kind of experience. I, from a very young age, was always interested in building. I was a Lego kid, as a lot of kids were. I really liked putting things together and taking them apart, and that, and sort of, you know, people telling me that I was good at math led me to engineering, and, you know, went through my you know, freshman, sophomore, and junior year in mechanical engineering, and sort of got near the end and went, you know, this, I really like the ideas here. I really like the problem solving, but I'm not sure that this kind of mechanical component is really what I'm passionate about anymore. And so what was my hobby in sort of making apps on the side when I was done with my homework and done with school projects became something that I spent a lot more time on, which culminated in taking the leap of faith and starting a company and trying to find clients and taking that full time. I found a lot of stuff transitioned pretty easily from engineering into thought processes of software development. But as my two other colleagues have said, it was a lot of learning, kind of constant learning all the time in order to kind of get comfortable with everything.
Yeah, it sounds like there are some themes here. For me, slightly different in terms of motivation. My mom was a single parent raising me, and I saw her constantly struggling to make ends meet. And so I vowed in high school that I was going to go into some sort of career path that enabled me to be self-sufficient, if you will, kind of that independent woman, if you will. And so I fell in love with calculus in high school, decided to pursue engineering, and really discovered in college that I just love understanding how things work. Why do they work the way they do? And so when I neared the end of my academic aspirations and I started looking around for opportunities, what better way to continue learning how things work than to go work for the company that basically invented networking, right? And so I had some friends, and I found out that the culture was also really great. It was something I was very much looking into. I wanted collaboration. I wanted to work with people, even if we were working on something more technical. So decided to kind of put my name out there, apply for a job at Cisco. And my goal was simply to convince them that while I had no background whatsoever in technology or networking, that I could prove I am here to learn. I'm a self-starter. I can take the initiative that's needed, and I can learn really quickly to prove value. So I harped on some of my other skills and my ability to learn quickly, and was able to get my foot in the door.
Awesome. Yeah. And on that note, many of our participants, you know, they might be thinking that, you know, they have no formal technical training or no technical background. How does some of the skills that are outside of the tech world transfer to a role in tech? So I'll talk a little bit about that, what that was like for me. So although the world of visual art is very different than the world of software design, visual language was the common bridge that kind of connect the two. You know, because you're still working with color, composition, layout, balance, visual emphasis, contrast. And so for me, it was, you know, although I was still learning the technical software to like create, I still had some of the foundations and the fundamentals of how to make something visually presentable, and having that visual language component being shared across, whether you're designing a painting or if you're designing maybe a mobile app, having the ability to convey information visually was a transferable process for me because they share the same language.
Yeah, for me, so Lindsay, I think you might find this interesting. I actually also have a background in child development. So that's kind of, and we both have degrees in psychology, so that's kind of funny. But I would say from child development, and even more so maybe from waitressing and bartending, I would say that some of the skills that transferred over are just generally being organized. You need to know how to multitask. I mean, if you've ever worked in a restaurant, and I know for sure that some of you here have, um, you know what it's like. You're constantly juggling a bunch of different things, you're multitasking, you're needing to sort of make sure that all of your tables and all of your customers are like, they're in different places in their meals, and you sort of have to like gauge where they're currently at and how you can help them get to their end goal. So follow through, good communication, collaboration, and I'd say generally just a willingness to learn and to try new things.
I'll piggyback directly off of actually, sorry, that's the wrong order. So, Lindsay, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say communication, and I feel like communicating with both kids and with their parents helped out just from I guess a diversity standpoint. And I also don't mean just being good at talking to people, but also being a good listener, maybe a little bit of social engineering in there too, and relationship building in general. And for recruiting specifically, I feel like a lot of recruiters, especially at high volume shops, are put in a position where they view candidate screens and candidate interactions as transactional. But the best recruiters, I feel like, never lose sight of the fact that even though candidates are where their money comes from, there's a huge human element in the recruiting process. And for folks in tech companies specifically, communication is key because agile workflow is where the present is and it's where the future is. You can't just close yourself up in a room and code anymore. You have to work with people. You have to do the daily stand-ups. You have to do pair programming exercises. You have to provide some degree of desk side support, sometimes even work directly with clients. So communication, I think, is top priority. And that goes for, I feel like, pretty much every job that you come from, you'll be able to bring in some degree of communication skills that'll help you out in the tech industry.
And Lindsay, just a quick question,
Sure.
just to help our participants out. Can you describe what the Agile process is and why communication is important in that?
So the Agile process is a modern workflow that's often used in the software development lifecycle, and it's basically setting goals for completion of a project that is revisited every day. I feel like some folks in the software development field would probably be a better explainer of that concept than I would, since I haven't actually been involved in Agile process firsthand. Brendan, maybe you can hop in.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as Lindsay said, Agile is a way to kind of organize task management. We use it at Lithios on a daily basis. We create and organize basically boards of tasks and organize those and our work schedule into a sprint structure. And we do that kind of on a 2-week basis. So we'll do a set of features and track those features on a daily basis for 2 weeks. And then we'll have kind of an introspective for a little bit, do a lot of quality assessment, do a lot of testing on that, and speak kind of with the client through that whole process before we move on to the next chunk. And that way, we don't, as Lindsay said, we don't go heads down in a dark room and just kind of build. We make sure that we're talking to clients, we're talking to the client's customers, we're really getting a good sense of what the world needs from this product and not just sort of inventing it on a whiteboard, making sure that it has a lot of real life implications. Tim, I think the only other thing I would add, because communication was my number one skill as well, is just, as Cassidy sort of mentioned, that sort of management and organization, and that can really just be anything, service-based, that can be running your own business or even just sort of running your own side hobby project. That amount of sort of organization and delegating to yourself about what needs to get done. Cassidy and Tim know one of our rock star developers at Lithios started his career as a farmer in Asheville. and then switched to tech a couple of years ago. But the skills that he learned, with crop cycles and all that stuff really kind of honed the way he plans and organizes tech projects, and it is very cool.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say communication, of course. So that way you have a 100% of people saying that. I think my ability to build relationships and connect with people is absolutely important in any industry. And then I would also say that my work ethic honestly has translated. I'm a very stubborn person. I don't give up on things. I want to understand them. So I'll keep pushing. I will continue driving a project until we complete it to a very high quality of completion. So I think my work ethic, my stubbornness, and then simply my thirst for knowledge. I'm intrinsically motivated to always learn and grow, as some of the other folks have already said. And that has served me well because the tech industry is innovating and evolving at a breakneck pace, if you will. So if you're scared of change and innovation, probably not the best industry for you, but that really energizes me. I call myself a change enthusiast, and I really enjoy being on that cutting edge.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really exciting to hear. So it sounds like loud and clear communication is the skill to have. And it's definitely exciting to jump into a career in tech, but there's also some challenges and hurdles to face. What are some challenges that everyone has faced when transitioning into a career in tech? I know that for me, sometimes I guess the nature of technology is just rapidly changing so quickly. So it's difficult to keep up with the latest trends, the latest languages and technology requirements. And I think for me, the greatest challenge is like, at first I thought that I had to do everything myself. I had to be the one who codes everything. I had to be the one who have to implement everything. And I think the challenging part for me was like letting go and delegating, to say, you know what, this project uses a specialty skill set that I don't have personally, but I can collaborate with someone who does have the skill set, or I can, communicate the goal that we have to reach, even if it's implemented in a different way. And that was a big challenge for me because I think I want to be the hero. I want to be the one who does it. And so letting go of that was, I think, the challenge for me. I thought the challenge was having to learn everything myself, but languages change, software changes, the tools change all the time, and I thought that the challenge was learning everything, but the real challenge is letting go.
That's cool, Tim. I can totally see that with you. For me, it's actually what you said it wasn't. For me, coming from a non-technical background, it really was that initial learning curve. So I remember telling my boss, Deshawn, that when I first started, I was just like, I'm not, it's just taking me so long to understand everything. Like, it's just so much information. There's so much complexity behind all of this. Like, I'm coming from a non-technical background. I don't know what any of this means. I remember telling him, I feel like I have been dropped off in a country where I don't speak the language and I have to get by. So I'm very happy to say that I have, it took about probably like 3 months for me to like really start to understand like what was going on and to understand like, different technical areas and like about our process and all that stuff. But yeah, for me, I would say coming from specifically a non-technical background, it was the initial learning curve.
I think mine is just that everything changes so fast, and I'm the opposite of Carissa in that I'm not a change enthusiast. I like working with things that I'm familiar with, and so it's been really helpful because candidates are usually more than happy to tell me about the new technologies that they're experimenting with, and also how they align with or integrate with other technologies in the ecosystem that I am familiar with. And that makes it easier for me to understand those technologies and talk about them in context with that candidate and with other candidates as well. And I think it's really important for people to be able to stay on top of things, even outside of work. because it can get easy for folks in tech to get locked into a dated stack or a dated work environment, and therefore a dated pay grade. So sometimes that learning and growth does need to happen, on their own time. They need to go out and do webinars. They need to work on personal projects, things like that, so they can stay up to date, even if their company doesn't necessarily prioritize that.
Yeah, I would absolutely second the continuous learning as just sort of a constant of the industry. I would say in my role, there's an interesting and sort of delicate balance, and this is sort of what Tim was saying, but between, planning and architecting a large software platform and then being detail oriented at the same time. And that context switching is, can even sometimes be exhausting, but there are some, great techniques to be used to, spend certain days working on platform architecture, which is what we'll do for a couple of weeks, and then being able to zero in on, moving something a couple pixels to the right to make sure that it's perfect and it fits the designs. But that kind of creating that balance and finding where you as a developer or as someone in the industry fits within that balance makes kind of you able to more effectively work with everybody, whether it be designers or admins or project managers in that field.
I think the biggest challenge for me making this transition was imposter syndrome. I am constantly surrounded by really, really smart people who seem to be achieving so much, and I questioned my right to be in this field. Am I smart enough? They're going to figure me out, I'm going to get fired or whatever it was, right? And so overcoming my own self-doubts and carving out the realization that I do have value to bring and that I do deserve to be here, I think was especially hard being a female engineer in a male dominated field. It's sometimes hard to build that support group or that community if you're only one female in the room or of a minority. So I think for me, imposter syndrome was the hardest to overcome, but I'm here on the other side of it, and I'm telling you, it's worth it.
That's exciting. Yeah, love to hear that, Carissa. And I know that's something that we all kind of face when jumping into a new role. My next question is, what are some common myths that can be debunked? We talk about these obstacles and hurdles to jump into a career in tech, and a lot of the participants might feel that these barriers and these obstacles are, too much to overcome. What are some common myths and misconceptions that are in the world of tech that can be dispelled? So the common one for me is that you can still apply for a job even if you're not qualified for 100% of the criteria. I've seen job posts where they say, well, we want a junior level, software designer who has 10 years of experience on these, we want 6 different languages. We want them to be an engineer, an IT professional, and also design and also illustrate, and do some copywriting as well. It seems overwhelming to look at that job description and say, oh no, like I don't have 100% of those. But one of the common misconceptions is that, usually if you fit most of them, it's still worth a shot. And I know that when Lindsay chats, she can chat a little bit more on the recruitment side, because I'm sure she sees a lot of resumes. But I'd say that's the one misconception, is that you don't have to fit 100% of the criteria. It's at least worth a shot.
Yeah, so I guess I would say, a common misconception is sort of, going off exactly what Tim was just saying, that you have to know how to code. I have no idea how to code. I've played around with HTML like this much, not much at all. I really don't know anything. But, here I am working in the tech field. I have a degree in psychology. So you don't have to have a specific degree. I probably would have thought, 3 or 4 years ago that I would have had to have a degree in computer science or something like that. And the other thing is, to get a job in technology, you don't necessarily have to know a lot about technology. You could just have those, great communication skills and ability to build rapport or ability to manage a project. It doesn't necessarily have to be directly related to technology.
Going off of what Tim said about the skills match, I think probably most of my placements are 80% fits, comparing their resumes to the job description, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. And I also find people get hung up on specifics. Like for instance, if a job post that I post out says you need 3 years of, I don't know, Angular, and you've worked in 3 years in React, don't get hung up on that. It's such a transferable skill. Same thing with, like, if you've worked in AWS and the company you want to apply for is working in Azure or Google Cloud, apply anyway. It's so transferable. And probably another thing that we had touched on a little bit earlier is that misconception that people in tech are antisocial. And I think we've all heard, there's a joke like, how do you figure out if an engineer is extroverted because they look at your shoes instead of their own? And I think it's funny, but it's so dated, it's so ridiculous. Not to mention that there are tons of positions that are people facing, customer facing in technology. There's technical project managers, technical product managers, customer success engineers, sales engineers. So if you like people and you like tech, there are so many opportunities out there for you.
Yeah. One that I hear quite a bit, and I know we've all, mentioned this in one way or another, but you don't really have to have an interest in entrepreneurship or be an entrepreneur in order to be in the tech space. I know that, with shows like Silicon Valley and all that, it's very easy to say that the culture around the tech industry is very entrepreneurship focused. There are a lot of kind of skills and all of us are involved in situations where we're able to be surrounded by a really great team with quite a bit of stability, and do great work without, the perils or the risk of jumping headlong into entrepreneurship. And I think the other one I would say, this is piggyback off of Cassidy's a little bit, is you don't really have to be amazing at math. I hear a lot of people say, I can't be a developer, I was in math, or I didn't get good grades in math. But development is transforming from, sitting and coding, assembly languages to very visual, very creative tools. Tim and I use builders that allow us to, put visual blocks in place in order to build web apps and websites versus writing every single line. And so we're sort of moving into the area where really it's the hard work and dedication, and a little bit of creativity that'll get you there, and not just having to be, a math expert.
I think I'm going to say something similar, but hopefully a slightly different angle. When it comes to feeling like I didn't have the skills I needed, I think I also made the mistake of discounting the skills and the value that I was bringing. Because what I found in tech is oftentimes hiring managers want people who have diverse experiences, diverse perspectives, right? We're not going to innovate and create new solutions if everyone thinks the same way. And so oftentimes it wasn't just my fear of not having the skills, but I didn't play up the skills I did have enough, because hiring managers are often looking for, where's that spark? Where's that, that thinking through problems differently, thinking outside the box. I didn't realize how valuable that was transitioning from a different industry.
Yeah, that's really sound advice. My next question is for someone who is looking for some tangible takeaways. So for some of our participants who are looking for like practical, everyday advice, what is maybe a piece of tangible advice to help them get their next job in tech? So one thing that I recommend, there's this conundrum because you need a job in tech to have the experience, but you need the experience to get the job. And that constant chicken and egg paradox often creates a hurdle for those that want a career in tech. So my best advice to give those, especially, you know, I'm speaking from from an app design background. Make up hypothetical projects. You know, contact your favorite. You know, just think of your favorite brands. So if you enjoy Nike, if you enjoy Apple, or if you're a big fan of like Airbnb, reimagine what their product, what their app could look like. And you know, you can include a disclaimer and say, hey, you know, this is a conceptual project, but I'm, you know, the job recruiters, they want to look at your imagination, your skill set, even if you don't have the tangible practical experience. So to give some tangible advice, especially those looking into project-based careers, I'd say make up your own passion projects, put together a very good case study, talk about the research that goes into it, document your process, show all your concept sketches, and then tell a story with that, and then bring it back to tell the why. Say like why you're passionate about this brand and why it matters to you. Those kind of stories and narratives really resonate with people, and it gives a hiring manager the ability to look beyond your lack of experience and see your potential.
Yeah, Tim, I really love that advice. That would be advice that I would give as well. You know, starting a side project or something hypothetical that is interesting to you in some way, just trying to figure out how to maybe do something on your own if you're able to. But another thing I would say is like a great thing that you could do would be, you know, attending this panel is a great step. Just finding different ways to invest in yourself. You know, a huge catalyst for me to get me to where I am was, you know, yes, I created this company, but I participated in a program. I wanted to learn more. And through that program, I met a lot of people who ultimately would connect me to my current boss. So the biggest thing for me, I would say, would be to use your network. And if you don't feel like you have a network, you probably do, first of all, but create one and use it.
Oh, Lindsay, you're
Sorry,
on
it
mute,
was on
by the
mute.
way. There you go.
Springboarding off of what Tim was talking about creating your own projects, something that I see a lot in devs that gives them a leg up is creating a GitHub account or a Bitbucket account, hosting their code there. They can keep track of their own improvement. Hiring managers and recruiters can look at their code and check out their projects. It also allows you to host a portfolio. So if you want to make like a personal site and talk about your skills, talk about your projects, you can do that also. And then put all of the keywords of all of the tools and technologies that you've used on your LinkedIn and on your resume. Because recruiters look for keywords, hiring managers look for keywords, and there's also all these awful automatic filtration systems when you upload your resume that can block your resume from landing on the desk of a human if they don't have the right keywords. So if you've worked with it, if you've touched it, put it on your resume, put it on your LinkedIn, because that's definitely going to increase your chances of having your resume be seen when you're applying for jobs.
And I'll piggyback directly off of what Lindsay said as well. We when we hire at Lithios for devs, look very closely, specifically on the portfolio site. That is kind of both a way to show how you build things and also how detail-oriented you are, how much you pay attention to the design of what you do, the organization of what you do. We look to the portfolio site as, you know, this is the thing that represents you online, so it should be what you consider perfect. And we want to make sure that what we consider perfect aligns with what you consider technically perfect. I think the only other thing I'd say in terms of projects and hosting code is very important. We find a lot of people that we look at will do boot camp tutorials or things like that, and they'll host a lot of their tutorial code. My advice would be, if there's something, even as Tim said, even if it's just a concept, an idea that you are passionate about, that you're interested in, that deviates a bit, is a bit more different or interesting, even if it's weird, away from sort of building a Twitter clone or something like that, that will get the attention of a recruiter, because that's that creative mind mixed with, you know, doing something spontaneous as a dev.
That's all great. I have a few. The first one is to get really clear on why you want to go into tech. When I talk to people and they say, "Oh, there are job opportunities. I want to make more money." Spoiler alert, that's not a great reason for a hiring manager to want to hire you. So I'd say actually doing the work and getting introspective about why you want to make this transition, what interests you about the field, why you're curious or passionate about it is number one. Number two, if you don't want to be a coder or developer, there are also lots of certifications out there. You know, if you look at Cisco, for instance, a tech giant, we've got CCNA certifications. We've got certs in all kinds of different architectures and technologies. Even if you don't want to be extremely technical, you don't want to be a network engineer, hands on the keyboard, on the command line, you can still learn a lot about the industry and the technology. And coming into a company like Cisco, if you understand the foundation of how we work as a company and the backbone of our business, that's automatically going to give you a leg up. And then the last thing I would say is informational interviews. My best networking advice is everybody poops, and everybody really likes to talk about themselves. So oftentimes it can be hard if you're looking on LinkedIn and you think, wow, this person has my dream job, or that's exactly the career path I want to take for myself. Reach out to them, right? For me, I don't get 100% of responses when I reach out to people on LinkedIn. Maybe I get a 40% response rate, but I reach out to people and I say, hey, this specific thing about your profile really interested me. I'd love to do an informational interview. In the times of non-COVID, it's can I buy you a cup of coffee or a lunch? Now it's can we do a Zoom or a WebEx session? But I would just say, don't be afraid to reach out to people. Even if you don't hear back from everyone, or if people say they're too busy. I've had tremendous success just reaching out to people and saying, hey, I really admire your career progression, or you have these skills that I'm interested in developing. Could you give me some advice? Tell me about your path. And I've made some really great connections, some friends, some hiring opportunities, and I've never regretted it. So informational interviews have been really, really helpful for me.
Awesome. And that's really great insight. So thank you all for sharing. So I'm going to open this up to Q&A for those of our participants that are joining virtually. Drop a question in the, not the chat, but the Q&A box down, and let us know some of your questions, and we'll try to get to like most of your questions. I'll try to get to as many as I can. So one common question that we hear, I got this question emailed. What is the best language to learn if I want a career in tech? I'll open this to the floor. We can just answer it popcorn style.
Well, I guess I'll start then. I would recommend JavaScript. I mean, there's a, and I think Lindsay would have some specifics on that. React is a very popular platform. We use that a lot. Angular is great as well. I personally started in native mobile app development. So for Apple products, that's a language called Swift. And for Android, that's either Java or something called Kotlin. And, there's a very interesting sort of debate going on between, developing native apps versus developing what are called hybrid apps, which are apps written in something called JavaScript that then compile down into both iOS and Android. But primarily kind of in the Lithios world, we use a lot of JavaScript, and it's a pretty fun language to pick up. So that would be my recommendation.
My recommendation would be to listen to whatever Brendan said.
I'm going to agree with Brendan, because pretty much regardless of what backend tool or language you're using, you're going to be using JavaScript on the front end. So if you want to learn Java, if you want to learn Python on the back end, you're still going to want to know some JavaScript, and probably a modern JavaScript framework like Vue or Angular or React to be used on the front end. And I would recommend, I think it depends on what sort of company you want to work with. So Java and .NET are always going to be big. They're always going to be big, used by larger companies. But I've been seeing in the past few years an uptick in enterprise use of languages like Ruby or Go, or Python as a web application development language. So it really depends on where you want to take things, but absolutely JavaScript.
That's a great answer. And our next question, this is a big one. How can I find out what salary to expect from a tech company? What factors go into that number? And what should I expect?
There are a lot of factors that go into that. Usually on the development side, we structure developers in kind of loose tiers. We have what's called a junior developer, and that kind of rolls up to a senior developer. And there, depending on the company, there are kind of spots in between for mid-level developers and things like that. And that's usually the number of projects you've worked on, more specifically the amount of time that you've been in the industry, maybe on a particular language or in a particular environment. That all will kind of very heavily weigh your salary choices. I would also say it very much depends on where you are. If you're in San Francisco, it's a very different environment than it would be in Raleigh. Also more competitive. But I find that Glassdoor is a pretty good kind of useful tool to see what the median is, what the mean is, where people are. Carissa or Lindsay, I'm curious if y'all have perspective on that as well.
I would say Glassdoor for sure. And then LinkedIn, I see a lot of job descriptions now that indicate the salary range for the position right on that position. So I think doing that homework at Cisco, I would say just broadly, certainly don't hold my feet to the fire on this one because it does vary quite greatly depending on location, the position, et cetera. But a lot of our entry-level positions start in the 50 to 65 kind of salary range. Again, very dependent on the role, your experience, your location, et cetera. But most of the time they aim to make sure you can live, right? We're not trying to nickel and dime people, but I would also say Glassdoor is great to do that research and figure out what's most important to you, right? Because I think salary for me is a component of consideration for a job, but it's not the primary component because for me, I want to make sure I enjoy my work. I work with great people. I have a safe, innovative environment that fulfills me. And then I want to make sure I'm making the right money. If you prioritize salary, you could end up in a toxic environment or working in an environment that you don't really enjoy.
Agree about Glassdoor, absolutely. Career Builder has a similar tool as well, although that might be paid. And something else to consider as well is what the total package looks like. A lot of companies will pay like the entire cost of your benefits, but might give you a lower salary. We also have a huge startup community here in the area that I'm involved in, and a lot of those folks will put together some super creative packages that may end up having a larger payout either immediately or down the line, but might have a slightly lower base salary than market. So definitely take a look at the total package when you're interviewing. Ask about things like stock options, ask about things like benefits, ask about bonus, ask about 401k, work from home flexibility post-COVID. Just never lose sight of the total package.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with Glassdoor. Glassdoor is an excellent resource. One big factor is really like the size of the company. You could have two jobs that have the same responsibilities in the same city, but the size of the company is a pretty significant factor. It also makes it more competitive. So, getting a job at like Apple or Google, having the same responsibilities could be the same as working at a local startup. But because it's Apple, it's going to be much more competitive in terms of how many applicants apply, even though the responsibilities may be similar. And also the challenges you face would be much more complex. So, two jobs might be maybe have similar responsibilities, but the bigger the company, the more complex the problem is, and usually offers more compensation that way. Yeah, really great answers. And our next question is really about that job application process. So this person says, I've applied to over 100 jobs and haven't been able to get an offer yet. I feel frustrated with the online application process. What should I do differently and how can I stand out? Really great question.
I would say to get involved in the local community somehow. And I don't mean like necessarily networking events. There's a Triangle Dev Slack channel, which is great. And it's not just for developers. There's Discord communities, there's meetup groups that are interest specific. There are co-working spaces in Raleigh and Durham that you can hang out in when there's not a COVID issue. I'm also clearly biased because I run Triangle Jobs on Reddit. I've hired a lot of people off of Reddit. I was hired off of Reddit myself into my current role. And there are jobs on those Slack channels that I mentioned before as well. Those are great because they all give you a direct line to employers and recruiters in a very conversational way without having to go through the clunky application process.
I think to piggyback on that, that's where the informational interviews come in handy as well. Kind of conversational, you take the pressure off, right? Because it's not a formal interview. I don't recommend asking anybody in an informational interview, okay, will you hire me now, right? It is meant to be a conversation. It's meant to be information gathering. And what I found is even if I don't get a job from that person, they might connect me with another person who is hiring, or 2 months down the line, they find out about an opening and they say, oh yeah, I remember Carissa was interested in a position like this. I'll reach back out to her. So for me, it's about building a network of people who are listening and have my best interests at heart, even when I'm not in the room.
All right, awesome. We are coming up at the top of the hour. I wasn't able to get to everyone's questions, but if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to visit our site, lithiosapps.com, reach out to us, and we're more than happy to do an in-depth, follow-up. And also, I do want to remind our participants we're offering one-on-one career coaching. So after this event, we'll be sending you a follow-up email. We are limited, so fill out the application, and if it's a good fit, we're really excited to kind of help you on your path to a career in tech. So one last question to kind of close this out. For those on the panel, looking back in time, there was that moment where you had that fork in the road. There's your current path, and there's the path forward in a career in tech. And a lot of our participants are in that stage themselves. So there's a lot of apprehension, a lot of uncertainty. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself looking back? So if you go back in time, what would you tell yourself? And what I would tell myself is, embrace the unknown, because it's easy to be in my comfort zone, to be in a world that I'm familiar with, but jumping into a tech role, I learned that I didn't have to know everything from day one. And that's something that I didn't realize. I thought I had to prepare, I had to study, I had to know everything. But I think what I'm excited to learn is that I can learn as I go and start somewhere and jump into the unknown.
I would say something similar. The person who sort of mentored me and introduced me to the program NC IDEA told me a quote that says, "The universe favors the bold." And I just love that quote. And it sort of, I think, piggybacks on what Tim is saying, is just go for it. Try something new. Don't be afraid to get outside of your comfort zone.
I want to go back in time and tell younger me that all the time I spent on Reddit is eventually going to pay off. Which I guess the takeaway from that is you never know what hobby or avenue is going to open a door for you or make a meaningful connection for you.
And I'll piggyback directly off of that as well. My kind of life mantra that I learned from a very close mentor early on in my career is you just don't know by looking at a door, or I guess to borrow an expression, looking at a book's cover, what it's going to open for you. And so you keep your options open. You explore different things. Really kind of when exploring your career options and getting into the tech industry, nothing is really a waste of time. If you're learning, if you're kind of exploring and growing, even if you're not actively working on a project or laying down code, there's a lot of growth that's kind of occurring, and that'll help you find a community that'll support you.
I would go back and tell my younger self, get out of your own damn way. I think there are always going to be obstacles and barriers that we face, systemic issues, hiring, logistics, all of that. For me, it's to know in your bones that you are worthy, you are valuable, and you deserve to be here, and to go after that curiosity or that passion and see where it takes you.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you all for attending. Very excited and grateful to have you on board. And thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.